Hi, my name is Gary Gomes. I'm a Vedic astrologer from New Bedford, Massachusetts. I've been around for a few years, close to 30 years, doing charts and doing analysis of charts, and also teaching students. I do teach students. The lighting is just, it's not intended to be spooky, although I am talking about the eclipse. It's just an indication that I'm shooting this late at night, and I'm trying to light the best way I can. So essentially, okay, so the big news this week is we have a blood red moon full eclipse in Cancer in Vedic astrology. So this is like the Jimi Hendrix lyric to Voodoo Child. The night I was born, the moon turned to fire red. So it has like ominous implications for people. It's not really, to me, eclipses aren't that frightening. I may be unusual among Vedic astrologers in that regard, but I really don't consider them all that frightening. I consider them opportunities for change, yeah, for shaking up things a little bit. They are a little bit inconvenient, um, more than a little bit inconvenient for some people. Depends on your rising sign, depends on your chart, but they do present opportunities for growth, for change, for meditation. A lot of people say you should stay inside and meditate and do spiritual work during an eclipse, which is a good idea under any circumstance, to be honest. But I think a lot of people are just sort of getting a little bit um, carried away by the intensity of this eclipse. It is significant. I mean, it's the first one we've had of this nature since around 2000, since around the year 2000. So that's I'm not playing making light of that. But a, a lot of the I can't even speak about bad press. I've seen some astrologers saying it looks relatively mild because it's in a nice lunar mansion, Pusha, and it'll be relatively benevolent. Others are saying, and I'll share my screen with you, um, that because it's in, um, it's opposed by Pluto, um, and it's, so Pluto cast, this is the eclipse at full development, not this chart, but this is a full station. So this is this is not when it starts. It starts in Gemini, then moves over to Cancer, and essentially, some people are saying because it's aspected by or has like a kind of a Y Pluto aspect to it, it'll be very disruptive. Um, I think we've already seen that disruption with the solar eclipse. I think we've already seen that kind of a development. I actually think, although eclipses are emotional times for people, I actually think this will be a conclusion of a lot of things for people, and wrapping up with a lot of things in a very big way. So let's say if you have, oh gosh, and certain countries, I'm going to do this. I see my location for the eclipse location, although I realize it's not there, but I figured it would be a good reference point. It'll actually be pretty good um, for Russia. It'll be pretty good. Looks like it'll be pretty good for the Middle East, just in general. Um, it'll be rough on this part of the world. Um, it looks like it's Thailand, Cambodia region, um, and parts of China and parts of central Russia probably won't do that well. So we're not talking about near Moscow. Moscow is going to be perfect, and so is Syria. But there is a little bit of disturbance around. Um, Let me see now, around the Hawaiian Islands and also in the South Sea. So, and also we're looking over here just a little bit for activated planets. It doesn't seem to be all that hard, except for the area in China and Central Russia. There are some other. Let me just increase the size of the screen so I'm sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, this is where and it's going to hit a little bit over Ankara, Turkey, and a little bit over Egypt and through Central Africa and down through here. But it looks like it's going to avoid any. And again, like the solar eclipse before, it's going to hit. Interestingly enough, it's going to hit right over Washington D.C. So there'll be some big disruption. But one of my colleagues had mentioned that it'll probably end the government shutdown, and it'll be, but it'll also leave parts of the area around Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Florida in a little bit of trouble, and also in Central America. And there's some danger of negative activity, maybe even earthquakes in places like Chile. But overall, and the other point I look for is Mexico. Mexico looks a little bit vulnerable to me right here. But the major thing is, and they were talking about any violence triggered by the eclipse. We have the particularly vulnerable spots tend to be Arkansas through Michigan, Illinois, and up into Canada. Now, again, without looking, and also in Spain and Ireland, and Western Africa. So I think that when you're talking about places like that, places in the globe which are so far spread out, and we don't have like actual accurate astronomical maps of some of the locations, it gets a little bit tough to predict. But we're already seeing some. I mentioned England just a few minutes ago. We're already seeing some signs that the government will be dismantled in England. The Theresa May's Conservative government will at least be up for scrutiny. It's possible, depending on her chart and depending on how strong her chart is, she might survive it, but it doesn't look like great for her. The other things you want to look at is a lot of people expecting Trump to collapse during this time, I think, are going to be surprised, because the push of moon is inherently a conservative moon, and it tends to. So that's why Theresa may survive, because Pusha is really. A lot of people view Cancer and especially Jupiter as being benevolent signs, benevolent planets, benevolent signs, and they are, but they're also inherently traditionalistic. So when you're expecting something good to come out of Jupiter, or at least Pusha in Cancer, I'm not talking about the other nakshatras, you're looking for something which will support the established order. So it's not necessarily going to bring about equity for everyone when an eclipse point hits those areas. The other thing you have to realize about eclipses is, and I've always had, it's a dictum of astrology that eclipse effects last for 9 months. after the eclipse itself, and I've always had trouble accepting that dicta because too many things happen in the interim. I'm not saying it isn't true. It's just that I haven't seen any really concrete um, evidence supporting it. So it may be true, it may not be true, but I wouldn't live my life in fear around it. The people who are going to be most affected by the eclipse, and it can range from anything from um, intense anxiety, um, something as minor as intense anxiety um, to changing jobs you know to leaving your relationship partner, depending on the nature of the chart. It will essentially be people who have sensitive placements around 7 degrees in the chart. So if somebody has planets around 7 degrees, they might want to take extra care. They might want to be extra careful around things um, like work and home life. There may be a lot of anxiety, a lot of arguments, a lot of miscommunication. We have a Mercury K2 conjunction going on when the eclipse is occurring, but that's more due to Mercury K2 than it is the eclipse. And also, at least from the chart, they'll probably want to be careful about family relatives. Especially female family relatives, and watch out for their health. This could be an epical eclipse. The United States, in particular, at least from Jim Kelleher's chart, is in a Moon Mahadasha. I'm sorry, it's in a Rahu Mahadasha. My apologies. And essentially, when Moon and Rahu get together, things do change. They do tend to start to unsettle. The United States has seen a lot of women announcing candidacy for presidency over the past couple of weeks, so that could be indicative of an eclipse point coming up. It's not unusual to see a lot more women enter political realms when you have, especially a Rahu and Moon combination in chart. But to say that will actually result in lasting change is maybe a little bit overly optimistic, because eclipse phenomena, like everything else, or like most things associated with Rahu, can be a bit illusory. So you can get the impression that things are going to change in a big way, and then a few months later, things are just pretty much the way they were. When we go into later into 2019, we'll have a combination very similar to around 1870 in Europe. And I think I may have mentioned this in the last video, I'm not sure. But basically around 1870 there were two major events that were concerning to people. One was the Franco-Prussian War, which was a fast war. It didn't last very long. And it changed the shape of Europe overall. And there is some signs, there is a sign that China is being affected by the eclipse. And it looks like Western China is being affected by it. So there may be some issues with other powers, with other countries about their expansionary tendencies, especially in the islands off China. The other thing that you want to look at is whether or not, in the United States, 8th house is Cancer, so that can indicate hidden enemies popping up. But I'm not really as convinced of that as I should be. I think you're going to see the United States go through a trying time economically over the next few months, especially between May and September. And I think it's going to pretty much stop being so agitated after that. The main thing when you're looking at an eclipse is you don't want to give. The eclipse is some people are going to hate me for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's a coincidence of time and space. So so essentially, Rahu eats up the moon. It scares the devil out of the moon, but the moon always escapes. Ketu eats the sun. It diminishes the sun. It diminishes its brightness, diminishes optimism to a certain extent. But it also makes us think more freely and more liberally. So there are all kinds of things, all kinds of hidden discoveries that solar conjunctions can act, or excuse me, that solar eclipses can bring about, and there are all kinds of reforms and desires for change that lunar eclipses can bring about. I think you'll see that happening a lot in this country over the next year or so. The next, in general, the next 15 years or so in the United States history are not going to be um, quiet times. There's going to be a lot of shift, a lot of upheaval. Some of it good, some of it good for reform, good for knocking existing power structures, and that's healthy. Every country needs that kind of an experience, not because I like to see people shaken up, but because certain things get lodged in place, and it seems like it takes forever to dislodge them. And both Rahu and Ketu dislodge things. The last Ketu Mahaj in the United States was in, if you follow the color chart, was in the late 60s, early 70s. And that was coincidental to the Vietnam War, but also to the expansion of consciousness that was taking place, and also to the movement towards freedom and civil rights, and a lot of interesting social movements. And Rahu is not going to be radically different, except you'll see more um, less emphasis on um, spiritual and destructive activities, and more interest in reform. So you'll see more people trying to grab on tightly to what they have. So I think I'm actually guardedly optimistic over the next 15 years of the United States history. I'm guardedly optimistic over the next 15 years of the world's history. The ramifications from the Franco-Prussian War, causing essentially leading up to World War I, didn't happen for another 40 years after that war occurred. So it really doesn't look like, and again, war isn't inevitable. If people are wise and can be kind and can be generous and can learn from the past, which is when I was a history major years ago in college, and I optimistically thought maybe we could do that. But if people are smart and they follow a good path, then a lot of these problems can be avoided. The other thing is, you'll start to see much more interesting spiritual movements over the next 15 years or so. A little bit more um, materialistic than the spiritual movements of the 60s and early 70s, though, and more emphasis on trying to change society overall. So not quite so escapist, not quite so pushing into the trying to escape into oneself, trying to bring more change externally, which I think is a positive thing. The other thing to keep in mind about eclipses is that, again, they're not they're Rahu is connected with panic. It is connected with real world events, certainly, but it's connected with panic and phobia um, and what I would call imaginary problems. So a lot of the problems that we're setting up for ourselves are actually problems we're making ourselves. There's a general fear of, there's a general xenophobia in the world right now, but it's understandable because a lot of immigration has brought a lot of strain to a lot of There's a lot of different countries. I'm not saying the immigrants don't have any right to be where they are, but but, but especially in Europe and in different parts of the world, it's put a lot of strain on local resources. Some countries it's also helped too. So yeah, so so there's always a balance there. The other thing I'd like to start talking about very soon. So I don't want to downplay the importance of the eclipse. It's a significant eclipse. It's um, the last eclipse of this type, as I said, was around 2000. So we have the stock market, um, the internet crash, what they call the internet crash, and I think you're going to see some kind of a down, some kind of a disruption in what they call cyber currencies, like a major disruption. And the other thing that I think you're going to see is some short-term panics over the next year. Again, they won't be anything that'll cause like a downward spiral or a depression. That doesn't look like it's in the cards. Um, the other thing that you're probably going to look at is powers or countries getting a little more paranoid about what they have and what they want. So that's really a downside. Rahu, when you'll see people getting a little bit more xenophobic. That's also a side effect of Rahu, but they'll be interested in different cultures. So you'll have this really kind of like really extreme effect of Rahu causing fear of people from different lands, but also fascination with them. So I think these are really interesting times. The eclipse points in Cancer and Capricorn is people with planets in those signs, people with their rising signs in those signs should be a little bit extra, should be extra careful during the next couple of weeks and maybe as far as the next 9 months. But people with planets, especially malefic planets like Mars or K2 at 6 degrees, should also be a little bit extra vigilant about health issues, about traveling, anything like that, about work. It's so these are very general predictions. What I'd like to talk to you about next is um, the actual construction of a Vedic chart. This was an event I just couldn't pass it by without saying something and just trying to calm people down a little bit about it and say, look, it's a great opportunity to this eclipse. I've never felt an eclipse. This past eclipse cycle presents a great opportunity for people to break out of their boundaries, to break out of conditions they're unhappy with, to really make changes in their lives. So that's the good thing. It's unsettling and disruptive, but it's a good thing ultimately. The other thing I'd like to get to next, though, is to start to look at planets and overall Vedic chart construction. And in particular, I'd like to start addressing some of the what I would call the fear and anxiety that some parts of Vedic astrology or the way Vedic astrology is interpreted by people start creeping into them, into them, either through well-meaning astrologers. You know, I'm not saying anybody's um, um, scaring anybody on purpose. These folks are well-meaning and they're teaching what they've been taught. But a lot of people I've seen have been panicking about what astrologers have told them, um, or what, um, or about dire conditions in their chart. And well, I don't want the astrologer to sugarcoat the reading. I also don't want them to scare the bejesus out of somebody with something which has like multiple explanations. It doesn't have to be death, doom, and destruction. It can be change, um, change for the good. It can be changed. It can be uh, disruptive, sure, and some signs and planets are easier to deal with than others. But every hardship gives an opportunity for change and for expansion and for growth. So these are important things um, that I like to advise astrologers about when they're looking at charts. Um, you don't focus on, well, I'm just trying to encourage you to do this. I'm not trying to tell you to do anything, but it's really counterproductive to focus on certain signs or planets being evil. Um, they're not evil. They have a function. They have a purpose, and they're not doing it to make people suffer. They're doing it for the evolution of the person, and maybe to clean up some patterns in the person's life. So there's nothing, as a great man once said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And especially when you're doing charts, inculcating fear or inculcating dread or inculcating uh, foreboding is number one, counterproductive. Number two, it can become self-fulfilling. So as astrologers, we have a particular responsibility to be truthfully us, but there's an aphorism, speak the sweet truth. And it doesn't mean truth has to be, you're doomed and you're never going to amount to anything. Um, it can be more like, well, you'll have these opportunities come into your life. These are things you should look at and explore. These other things, who knows, you might do well with them, but your chart doesn't indicate that. But you should always give it a try. There's nothing that says, I've seen charts, I mean, truly, people who have like tremendous barriers in their charts make great successes out of their lives. And it was those barriers that made them the great successes they were. So again, there's a constructive way to use a chart, and there's a destructive way to use a chart. And I'd rather use the constructive. So that having been said, I won't preach. I'll get down to like real brass tacks astrology in the next video, and I hope to see you soon. Not as long as between the last video and this one. This past week, it's just seemed almost impossible to sit down and find time to do a video. But I'll make sure that I do make the time over the next few weeks, and this series will continue. So again, I think it may be the way I'm doing this is giving you, especially about the dashes and especially about this presentation, I'm giving you more about my philosophy. And I think it's important to know a person's philosophy about what they're doing, as well as the techniques they use. Because if the philosophy is uplifting, encouraging, that's what I like. If it's discouraging or doom laden, I'm not crazy about that. So you want the truth, and I'll give you the truth, but I'll also give you the ways to help and ways to work well with the materials you've been given. Okay, thank you very much. Namaste. Oh, and happy Sankranti.